All right, everybody, welcome to today's session. My name is Josh Broltheim. I'm going to be your instructor for today, and we'll go ahead and get started here. It's top of the hour, and so let's do it. And so, like I said, my name is Josh. I'll be leading today's session. I have one of my peers assisting me. His name is Odell. He's going to be assisting in the chat. So throughout today, if there's any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. Odell will answer them. If they're appropriate for the larger group, we'll bring them up, and that's how we'll communicate. We have a pretty large group, so I don't think we'll be able to do let you guys speak live, but yeah, certainly want you to ask questions. Let's start. So we're going to be together for the next 3 hours. Hopefully you're prepared for that. Hopefully you've joined one of our Sumo certification sessions before. If you haven't, that's perfectly fine, of course. But if you have, you kind of know the schedule a little bit. So we're going to be together for the next 3 hours. The next 2 hours are going to be devoted to labs and slides, basically content. I'm going to be delivering the content. We're going to do labs, which you'll be doing the content, and that's how we'll learn. And then we've set aside the last hour for the exam. So if you've taken an exam before with us, you kind of, like I've said earlier, kind of know the deal. If not, we'll walk you through how to do it and the processes and all that. Exams are free for you, free for your organization. So certainly, keep that in mind. Can you guys confirm that you can hear me? Just want to make sure that if you could just go ahead and put in the chat that you guys are hearing me. Cool. Okay, good. All right, good, cool. Good. All right, there we go. Thank you all. All right, so that's the plan. Let's go ahead and let's dive in here. So, one promotion that we want to promote. Once again, if you joined one of our classes recently, you know this promotion, but what we're offering is a Uber Eats voucher. So for taking today's class, we want to reward you or bribe you, depending on kind of how you want to look at it. So take today's class, which you're already here, take the exam, pass it, which you will, and we'll talk about that later, and then send us an email with that certificate. Send it to training-promotions@sumologic.com, and I'll remind you about this later. And include your work email and your title. Title is an important field, and we'll send you that $15 Uber Eats voucher. It's going to be delayed. It's going to be a little bit longer than 48 hours. We're about almost a week out, but we'll get it to you, and you'll enjoy it. So normally, of course, when we would do these in person, we'd feed you basically when we did these trainings, but different state of the world, and so we still wanted to feed you. So we thought this was a good way to reward you, bribe you, whatever kind of verb you want to use, but it's great motivation. And so strongly encourage you to take advantage of it. If you're going to be part of our classes tomorrow and the next day, or any future classes for a while, this promotion is active as well. So we're offering a class tomorrow on, what are we doing? Cloud Sim, I think, and the next day Cloud Sim Admin, or regardless of what we're doing tomorrow, you can take advantage of that promotion and earn a few gift cards. So, and like I said, I'll remind you about that after the exam or when you're taking the exam, because that's really when you need to know about it. Gonna just jump in here. So let's do it. So Sumo Logic data flow. If you've taken a course with us before, I know I've said this a few times, you've probably seen this slide, and I hope you have. And if you haven't, I'm going to go through it. But it's a good, simple slide of Sumo Logic's data flow. Step one is really where we're going to be focusing on today. And step one is all about collecting the data. This data, wherever it is, needs to be brought into Sumo Logic. How do you do that? Well, that's what we're here to discuss, among other administrative topics. But so step one is all about bringing the data into Sumo. Then step two is about utilizing that data. It's sitting in Sumo, and now how do you start to query that data and analyze it and present it? And so that's where step two of searching and analyzing, utilizing the operators, presenting things in charts or graphs or whatever form makes sense. And then once again, taking that to the next step, which is visualizing and monitoring, which is setting up alerts, setting up dashboards, utilizing Sumo without actually being in the query system and without even knowing how to load the data in. So step one is administrative, that's our class. Step two, we really go is our search mastery class is probably the most appropriate class for this. Also, our cloud security monitoring and analytics course is pretty operator heavy. And then step three, visualizing and monitoring, we kind of cover in all our classes because it's just a good way to present your data back as those alerts and dashboards. But today's focus is that step one. And as just described, these are the steps. I'm going to go into them. So these slides are a bit unnecessary, but basically with that step one is getting your data into Sumo. And we're going to talk about the ways or a couple of ways, there's many ways to get data into Sumo. And we're going to look at those shortly. Then step two, once again, is that searching and analyzing, and then visualizing and monitoring with those dashboards or graphs or other visual elements, whatever you prefer, maps even. All right, so now let's go ahead and start to talk about the data collection strategy. We just talked about or said data collection is a topic. Well, now let's start to dig into it. So what we're showing here is, or attempting to show here, is the start of collection or the areas of collection. That's not really a good way to say it. But essentially at the top of the screen, top center, we have that Sumo Logic cloud and that cloud icon that we've all seen and known to love over the past 10 or 15 years now. That's where the data needs to arrive. And that's where we need to get the data into. Now, how do we get that data into the cloud, into Sumo Logic? Well, it depends a little bit on where the data resides in the first place. What I'm trying to show here is on the left and the right-hand side of the screen, I have two different flavors of collectors, a hosted collector and an installed collector. The collector is going to be, as we're starting to talk about it already, but we'll see shortly, is essentially a little agent that grabs data and sends it over to Sumo Logic. A little more complicated than that, but not too much. Now, with the right side of the screen, right side, the hosted collector, I want to talk about the data that's hosted in the cloud, data like AWS data, most common, GCP, Azure data, etc. That's a very popular form of data, is data in the cloud. More and more every day that becomes more popular. Now, one not problem with data in the cloud, but from a collecting standpoint is, how do you get that data into Sumo Logic? Well, you would need to utilize this collector that I'm starting to describe and allude to multiple times. Now, in a hosted collector environment, there's not a place to install a collector or an agent, a little kind of Java app, if you will, because those environments are ephemeral. They're getting stood up and stood down. They don't live sometimes longer than a minute or two even. And so there's not really a way or a place to, like I said, install something. Now, the data still needs to come into Sumo Logic, and what you'll do is you'll utilize essentially a hosted collector, which is essentially you providing some basic information into Sumo Logic or in Sumo Logic about your data. Essentially, you give us, if we're talking about AWS data, you would give us the AWS credentials, you'd put them into the system, and then on your behalf, we retrieve the data for you. Now, on the left-hand side of the screen, what we're showing here is, or trying to show here, are, every time I say it, it feels weird, but older technologies, things that sit behind firewalls that might generate local files, host metrics, syslog data, et cetera. Now, in those cases, those are usually more physical machines. It might be a server farm, it might be your laptop, but they're usually bare metal or bare bones. Now, for those type of machines or devices or environments, we can, or you can actually install a collector, because you can actually install a little agent that can live and reside and sends data to Sumo Logic. And so for those environments, an install collector is going to be a great solution. We're going to talk about both in a few moments. We have more slides about those, but this is the introduction to the two different flavors of collectors. Both are doing the same job, bringing the data into Sumo Logic. Once it is in Sumo Logic, it doesn't really matter whether it came from a hosted or installed, or it's in Sumo. And basically, you would use one over the other based on where the data is or resides, that cloud or non-cloud. And you can have multiples. So we have some customers that have a single collector. Maybe they're only using AWS and they have one collector, hosted collector linking to AWS, and that's it. We have customers that have 10,000 collectors and are using all these services and 100 others that you've never heard of. And that's fine. And you're not charged per the collector. So it just depends on your environment. And we'll talk about the need or when you would install collectors and multiple collectors in a few slides as well. All right, so starting to talk about the collectors, as starting to allude to, but now the slide hopefully should kind of mimic everything I just described. But the installed collector, so that's going to be installed on a system within your deployment. Locally or remotely, doesn't matter, but it's actually going to be installed. And as you'll see shortly, we're going to install it, and it's the traditional terms and agreements, and it's going to install to a directory. We all know how to install a file or a program. And as it says, sources are going to collect the data available in your deployment. So the installed collector would grab the data for that deployment and send it over. If you have multiple deployments, multiple environments, you might need multiple collectors, but we're still getting there. And one nice thing about the installed collector is or I guess it's nice, if you do have issues, the collector logs are easy to read and troubleshoot. So it's an easy way to start to troubleshoot if there's an issue. Now, the hosted collector is so simple, there really aren't any issues. It's hosted by Sumo Logic. It's agentless, so there is nothing to install. And so it's going to seamlessly collect or connect and collect those popular environments, AWS, Google, Microsoft, et cetera. And so once again, just based on where the data is. Now, as I alluded to earlier, again, how many collectors do you need? It depends, and there's no wrong or right answer. We have large customers that have one collector and large customers that have 10,000 collectors, and small customers that have a wide range. It's just up to the environment to dictate. But this is a kind of a good rule of thumb, and these values at the bottom, I'm going to go over them, but it's not necessarily that you remember each one, but just the idea that I want to express. So how many collectors do you need? Typically, you would have an installed collector on a dedicated machine. Once again, if you have a lot of dedicated machines, you might have multiple collectors, but you would have kind of a collector based on a machine. Now, as you start to have growth, you may need more than one installed collector. If you want to ingest more than 500 separate files, you're going to need more than one collector. So if you have 700 files on a device, well, you need more than one collector. If you have memory or CPU limitations, these collectors, these agents are very lightweight. As you'll see, they take up very few resources, but resources are precious, and you might not be able to, spare them. And so you might need to have a different kind of architecture hierarchy with your collectors if you want to spread them out. Geographically separated regions. There's no reason. Well, you may want to backhaul your traffic, but you may not. So, for example, if you have a office in New York and an office in Tokyo, and those are where your servers are, you probably want to have a collector on each device. Otherwise, you might have to backhaul your Tokyo office to New York and then send it to Sumo Logic, which just is a waste of, once again, resources. But if you want to do that, you can, but not really recommended. And then the amount of logging traffic or events per second. So once again, if you have more than 15,000 events per second, you'll need more than one collector. And once again, I don't want you to remember, or if you remember those numbers, that's great, but really just the idea that kind of as you grow, you may need more collectors. And we're going to talk about that idea in a few more minutes as well. So here's a diagram that's trying to explain the collector story a little bit better. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have hosted collectors, which previously was on the right-hand side of the screen. But here we have on the left-hand side, the hosted collector. So we have the cloud where the data is residing. Might be AWS, might be Google, might be Microsoft, might be all of them. And then we basically have a collector sitting in front of or sitting in the Sumo Logic cloud that's going to grab the data and bring it into the cloud. Really, it should be simple to understand. Cloud to cloud, easy. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have our installed collector, and we're showing two different methodologies to installing or utilizing that collector. It's the same collector, it's just kind of where do you install it and what makes sense. So here's what I'm trying to show on the top. On the top, I'm showing centralized data collection, where essentially imagine we have 10, 15 servers, could be 100, but we have a bunch of servers. And essentially, we're going to have a single collector that's sending the data into Sumo Logic. So those 10 or so servers are going to send their data to that single device, that single computer that has the agent installed. And then that agent is going to transfer the data into Sumo Logic. Now, there's pros and cons of why we would want to do that, and we'll talk about those pros and cons in a moment, but that's one idea of having a dedicated or centralized method. Another idea is local data collection, where each device has its own agent or its own collector. So if you have those 10 servers, you have 10 collectors. Once again, good and bad, and you get a mixture of both. Not good and bad, rather, excuse me. There's pros and cons, which I'm going to show in a second, but these are just different, architecture ideas. And you can have a combination of both. You could have some of your machines have collectors installed on them, and then others that need to be centralized use that methodology. And then others have the hosted collector. Really, once again, just depends on your environment. And hopefully at this point, you're working, or you or somebody in your organization is or has worked with somebody on our side to kind of brainstorm of what makes sense. Of course, we're giving you this information and you should be able to kind of do it on your own, but we at Sumo are here to help, and you should have an account rep and all that. So hopefully these ideas have been discussed and this is not new to your organization. But if it is, this is a good learning point as well. All right, so let's go into these different options a little bit more and talk about the pros and the cons. So the first one I want to talk about is cloud data collection. And this is, it's starting to get repetitive, but intentionally so, and easy to remember. Cloud data collection is going to be used when the data is generated in the cloud by cloud services and is collected via Sumo Logic's cloud integrations. The source types are cloud-based, S3 data, HTTPS data, G Suite, O365, et cetera, et cetera. Now the benefit, once again, it's hosted by Sumo Logic. There's no software to install, can be configured with a number of sources, and is agentless. So in that case, it's kind of all benefits, no drawbacks. And so once again, if customer is using cloud infrastructure, cloud data collection is the model that supports it pretty seamlessly. We won't do a lab with this, but I will show it to you, and you'll see just it's very straightforward. You basically select the service, you put your credentials in, and we grab the data. So you'll get a look at it. And if I don't show it, please remind me. Now back to the ones that are a little more I was going to say controversial, need a little more discussion rather, is these couple. So the local data collection versus the centralized. So the local data collection, once again, is where the collector is going to be installed on all the hosts. And once again, it doesn't have to be all, but in this case would be a group of hosts. And then the log data that's produced on those hosts is going to be sent using the Sumo Logic agent via an HTTP connection or HTTPS connection, excuse me. The typical source types that would be used in local data collection are typically local files. So OS data, Windows events data, syslog data, script data. The benefits here is, one, there's no hardware needed at all. And you get direct access to your logs, and it provides easy troubleshooting because you have that collector agent that helps with troubleshooting. And we can look at that actually as well. We don't have a lab with that, but we can when we install the collector. Now, the drawbacks or disadvantages, these are things that can be overcome, but these are things that we want to point out. The first one is it requires outbound internet access. So keep in mind, if you want your device to send data to Sumo Logic, it needs internet access, and specifically outbound internet access. And you may have an issue with exposing that device to the internet. Now, keep in mind, it's not it's not full wide open internet access. You can choose, specific IPs, whitelist, things like that, but you are essentially opening that device up, and that might be an issue for you. There does needs to be software installation and management. So hopefully you have the ability to, as an admin, roll these things out, but some environments you might not have tools like that. If you do, very easy to roll out as an AMI or things like that. But if you don't, it gets a little trickier. And then that resource usage on the target. So it is about 1% of the computing memory, which, it might not sound like a lot, but if, when you're paying the bills, it can be. And when you're hovering at a high amount, adding 1% can be a lot. So these are things you want to consider. The scenario where local data collection is helpful or best is when you have a large number of target hosts. And as it says here, you don't have the resources to maintain or build infrastructure for centralized collection. Now, there's down points to centralized, as we're going to talk about in a moment, but there are benefits, and this is the one of using the local. Let's see, anything else on this slide that's worth pointing out? No, that's about it. And now we're going to talk about centralized. So centralized data collection, as the name implies, collectors installed on a set of dedicated machines or a singular machine that collects the log data from a variety or a group of target hosts and then forwards the data to the Sumo Logic backend. Now, the benefit here is no outbound internet access is needed for those other devices, and you can leverage your existing logging infrastructure. The drawbacks, they're they're all tied together in scale, dedicated hardware, and complexity. So here is a drawback. Once again, not impossible to overcome, but just something that's worth considering. So scale, for example, if you have 10 servers sending data to a centralized device and you grow 10x, you're going to need to adjust for scale. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to need 10x collectors, but you might need more based on those other slides I showed about the logging events and things like that. Dedicated hardware. You might have 10 devices sending to one, 10 servers sending to one computer that Sumo is then getting that data from. What if that computer goes down? Well, then Sumo's not going to get the data, and that's going to be a problem. And so you need to have dedicated hardware, or not need to, but it's recommended. And the same idea with failover, in that idea of what if things go down? Do you have failover that still sends the data into Sumo Logic? And these, once again, these drawbacks are just considerations. Easy to overcome. Sumo Logic can help you with some design ideas, but you do need to consider or keep in mind for those situations. All right. Collecting metrics. I'm going to go over this pretty quickly, only because it's really kind of the same idea. Metrics like logs need to be brought into Sumo Logic. They need to reside in that cloud. Based on where the data resides, you would use the installed collector versus the hosted collector. It's the same collector for logs and metrics. We'll see that shortly. Just kind of reminding you that we do metrics as well. This slide, I'm just going to, well, it's on the screen, so I'll just mention it, but it's not, well, it's important, but it's not really the focus for today. But just as a reminder, metrics ingestion and retention is a little bit different than logs. And so we're encouraging you to utilize metrics. We're actually giving accounts, I think this is still accurate, I hope, free DPMs, and DPMs are a measurement of metrics, data points per minute. So long story short, if you're not using metrics, we encourage you to do so. If you are using metrics, just keep in mind the ingestion is calculated a little bit different. But I don't believe you're quizzed on this at any point, so not necessary to really go too much deeper on it. Yeah, so let's see, questions. There's a question, can we have more than one source type? I think I'm about to talk about that. So let's see if I do. If not, I just need some clarification on the question, Usha. But I think we're going to grab that or get into that. All right, so let's go ahead and keep going. All right, so metadata design, and this might get that question that Usha was asking. What is metadata design? So what we want to talk about is metadata and how Sumo Logic uses it. It's important to note, I think it's important to note, that metadata is not designed by Sumo Logic. We didn't come up with it. I don't think we want credit for it, but it's a term, or it's utilized in not all fields of life, but in various aspects of technology. But where we use it is it's going to be a tag that's going to be associated with the log messages. So, and when a log message is collected by the collector, it's going to be tagged automatically with some values, which we call metadata. On the top of the screen, or in this picture rather, we show a couple of samples of some of the metadata tags. There are more than these. We'll see them. I think we'll look at an example shortly, but a variety of tags get applied to the data. Now, for example, these tags might be the name of the collector. So when your data is collected, that computer or that device, that machine name, that collector name is going to be tagged, stamped on the data. And that way you can locate your data through that collector name. Similar with the source name or the type of data that's ingested. Now, the collector name, is the collector name going to be a suitable way for you and your peers to locate your data? Yes or no? And you don't have to answer yes or no. It's a rhetorical question, I guess. And the answer is maybe. Now, you might have one collector, as I mentioned. And so if you want to search collector one and you only have collector one, probably pretty easy to find that data because that's the only source of data you have. But as you start to have more devices, the collector name is typically going to be the computer name. And you'll see that in the example, or not in the example, but the lab when we install the collector. Now, you could have 10,000 collectors, which means you could have a list of essentially 10,000 computer names. Now, are you and your team going to know that if they want this specific type of data, they need to go to collector 4321 or collector 9364? Probably not. Those numbers are meaningless. They might be mapped to something internally, of course, on your side, but probably not. It's just not a very clean way to locate your data. What we want you to use is the source category as the main metadata tag. The reason being, it allows you, and we're going to talk about many reasons why metadata source category specifically is important, but it provides you and your organization with some structure, a directory type structure for this name, for this data. So for example, on the screen right here, I have the field of the name, of labs/Acquia. Now, knowing nothing about the data that we're going to look at, and we might not even use the labs Acquia data, in fact, we won't, but knowing nothing about it, you still have some understanding of the data. You know this is lab data. You know this is not QA data. You know this is not production data. This is lab data. This is Acquia data. It's not Apache data. It's not O365 data. It's a specific type of data. And so now telling you it's labs Acquia data, you know it's labs Acquia data versus production O365 data or dev Apache data or whatever it might be. So you're starting to get a structure of your data, which is going to make it, well, we're going to talk about the reasons why in a moment, but it's going to make it easier for everybody. And when I say everybody on your side, not Sumo's, but for your employees. What we encourage you to do is use this directory, folder, tree structure, kind of whatever analogy you want to use to name these source categories. So you have these components, component 1/component 2/component 3, lab/Acquia, production/Apache/Access, et cetera. But what groupings do you want to use for these? I'm saying to use labs, but that might not make sense to you. But environment is a good name for one of these source categories and as kind of the top tree structure, if you will, if you're bringing in various environmental data. If you're only bringing in lab data, and that's the only type of data you're bringing into Sumo Logic, searching by production data or lab data or labeling that data as lab data doesn't really make sense. It's all lab data. But if you have production data and lab data and dev data and UAT data in Sumo Logic, then splitting it out by prod and UAT and dev is going to be beneficial for you. The application name, splitting out your data of Apache and O365 and Acquia, et cetera, might make sense. If you're only bringing in Tomcat data to Sumo Logic, then having the Tomcat label doesn't make sense. Geographic information, same idea. If you want to split up your data based on region, utilize some sort of geographic identifier. If you only have one main office or your theory is, all data is global and there is no physical location for it, then location just is not going to make sense. Same idea, AWS region, business unit. If you're not using these things, they won't make sense. But if you are, they're a great way to start to utilize this tree structure or folder structure. I'm going to do two things here. I still want to go over the rest of the screen, but I want to go ahead and put this link into the chat. What this link is, it's a link to a support article called Good Source Category, Bad Source Category. And it kind of just goes over the idea of what makes a good one, what makes a bad one. Now, why are we using these source categories besides the fact that I'm telling you it's helpful? Well, these are a couple of the reasons where they're going to be helpful. With this directory structure, I'll just allude to it as directory structure, you can start to define the scope of searches. You can also start to utilize wildcards in here. So what I'm doing here, I just want to make my screen bigger, sorry, to share that, there we go. So for example here, define the scope of searches. If I say somebody can only access, or I want the search to only access source category equals networking/firewall/star, that means if I'm using proper source categories, that they can only access, or we can only view networking firewall data. We're not going to be able to view networking antivirus data or networking disk imaging data. It's specific to the directory. And so we're starting to utilize that and using the wildcard to start to drill further down. If we were using the collector names, you could not do this because you might have a million collectors, not a million, 1,000 collectors though, grabbing all different firewall data, but you can use one common metadata source category or metadata tag to locate a group of data. Partitioning, we haven't talked specifically about partitioning or indexing. We will later about why it's good. Essentially allows you to put your data into buckets. And by doing this with source categories, you can now put your data into different buckets. One bucket could be production networking data. One bucket could be QA networking data, and now you have these different groupings. And then using RBAC, role-based access control, which we'll also talk about it a little bit later, you can start to control who can do what with your data. So I can go ahead here and say, I only want my security team to access AWS/sec/CloudTrail data. If they're not part of the security group, they can't access the data. And that's another benefit of source category. So really strongly encourage you to use them. Hopefully they're not news to you. If they are, that's fine. I mean, that's why we're here today. But wanted to show you how to go ahead and do that. So these are just some best practices. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go ahead and jump into the labs. So let's go ahead and do so. And let me go ahead and show you how we're going to do so, because we have some credentials set aside for you. What we're going to do is we're going to log in together. We're going to use these credentials that I'm going to paste into the chat. And if you need help with them, Odell is here for us. But what we're going to do is go to service.sumologic.com, which you should be familiar with. We're going to use the email of training plus admin number. And I want you to select a 3-digit number. Maybe you want to be training plus admin 007. Maybe you want to be training plus admin 123, training plus admin 798. Pick a 3-digit number. And at sumologic.com. Go ahead and log in, as Stacy is already doing, which is great. Once you're logged in, if you can put the number in the chat. Doesn't really matter for today if there's overlap. Yeah, for today, it's fine if there's overlap. So if you could just put the number just to kind of confirm you logged in properly. And then the password, I can get to it but if you're logging in already, that's great, is Feb 2022, admin with a capital A, exclamation point. So go ahead and log in. Credentials are both on the screen and in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and log in myself because I want to use this, not the same account, but a similar one. So logging in with training plus admin, I will do 234.com, and that password was Feb 2022, capital A, DMIN, exclamation point. Once again, if you need help, please let us know. It's probably going to be a typo if we're being honest, but still let us know if you need help. If you haven't used credentials with us before, these credentials are, as you can probably guess, training credentials. You're welcome to use them after today. So they'll be good for the next week and a half or so. And so you can use them later. But ideally, you're logged in. So hopefully you were logged in and you're looking at a screen. Actually, I don't know what screen you're looking at. Hopefully you're logged in and you potentially have a bunch of tabs open. You might be on the collection screen. What I want you to do is go to the home page. You can close these tabs. So if they are open and annoying you, go ahead and close the tab or all the tabs. But hopefully you're kind of close to this home page. Hopefully you've also been in Sumo Logic before, but if you haven't, welcome. We're going to be using the black bar. We're not really going to be doing anything with the middle portion today too much, but we'll a little bit, but we will be using the black bar. If your password's not working, try another account. It's possible it got locked. So please do that. So let's see, once we're in here, what I want us to do is get to the labs. Labs are going to be pretty easy to get to. Once you're on the home page, go ahead and click on Learn. And then if you haven't been in the Learn tab before, many things to learn about Sumo Logic in regards to videos and documentation and labs, which is really the importance for today. In the middle of the screen, it should say Hands-on Labs Administration, and you should have your labs. They might be checked with a green mark already. That just means somebody has used this account previously to do those labs. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it just doesn't matter. But what we're going to do is click on the first lab or the introduction. When you click on that first lab, it should open up a new tab. I'll go and paste this link to the labs in the chat, just in case you lose it, or I don't know why you'd want to, but in case you need it. And then what we're going to do is go to lab 1. So once again, we should have Sumo Logic open, should have our labs open either through going through the Learn tab or the link I just provided. And we're going specifically to lab 1. All right, I'll give everybody just another moment or two. I think we're pretty close to being good, but no huge rush. All right, I think we're good. So what we're going to do with these labs, I should describe these labs, and this image attempts to describe these labs, is we're going to install collector. Now, hopefully you can participate in this lab. If you can't, don't take it personally, but your machine might be locked down. We're about to install this collector and we're about to send some data through it. And it's possible your device might not allow you to download an exe or something like that. And so if you can't, you'll still watch me do it. You'll still get a feel for it. So hopefully you can participate, but if not, like I said, it does happen every now and then that some people's devices are just pretty locked down. But what we're going to do is we're going to install collector. And then in lab 2, we're going to set up an Apache Access log source. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take data from our laptop and pretend that our laptop is a server, or pretend, I mean, it can act as a server, and send data from our laptop to Sumo Logic. In lab 3, what we're going to do is we're going to send metrics from our laptop or our device to Sumo Logic. So you're going to get the experience of sending logs as well as metrics. Once again, if you have issues with these labs, hopefully we can work them out. We'll help you with them, but it's possible you might just have issues with installation. But let's see. Let's find out together. Okay. So in lab 1, what we want to do first is we want to go ahead and download this text file. This text file, and if I click on it, I'm going to see the text file, which I don't want to see it. I want to download it. So I'm going to right click on this text file and do save link as. What this text file contains is, like I just mentioned, is Apache access log files, so sample data. So we want to take this sample data and we want to essentially send it to Sumo Logic and then use Sumo Logic to look at the Apache data. So now we have our data. That's the easy part. Well, this is all pretty easy, but that's the easy part. What we want to do now is we want to install a collector. So how do we do this? Well, let's go ahead and do it. We're going to go to the black bar within Sumo Logic. If you don't see the black bar on the far left, it might be hidden. Click on the 3 horizontal lines and that will reveal it. Once you're in that black bar, you're going to go down to administration. It's possible in the real world you may not have access to administration. This is something that can be denied or granted. So these things that we're showing you, like I said, you might not see in the real world just based on your permissions. But when we go through the portion on permissions, you'll now know how to give yourself permissions if you're already an admin, which in that case, you wouldn't have the admin link, but nevertheless. Go ahead and click on administration. And I just want to make sure that you see those things in there. Now we're going to go to manage data because that's where we're going to focus on first is collection. And once again, you may not have access to collection in the real world as well. Administrators can decide this, but in this case, we give you access. When we go to collection, what we're going to see are those collectors. So these are all the collectors that we, either myself or students or whoever, have installed into Sumo Logic. We see information about them. So I'm going to skip the first. Well, no, actually, I'll show the first one. The first one is very straightforward. This is an example of a hosted collector. What we see here is the name of the collector. We see the status. Is it healthy or is it not? Healthy being, is it alive? Is it pingable? This is essentially it. The type and other information. We see the source categories. So here for, well, any of these. Here, for example, here's some AWS data that's being brought in. Here's a graph showing that data has come in the last hour. Here's the amount of messages in the last hour. And here are some of the source categories that we're using. Now, what we want to do is we want to add a collector because we want to bring a new source of data into Sumo Logic. So what we're going to go do is go to the top of the screen, top right, and click on Add Collector. At this point, we need to decide what type of collector do we want to utilize. Do we want to use the installed or the hosted? Well, based on the discussion earlier of is your data in the cloud or not, is going to dictate that answer. We want to use the installed collector in this example because we want to, as I mentioned earlier, install the collector eventually on our laptops or on our devices. So we're going to select installed collector, and we're going to select the OS or the flavor. So Mac. I'm going to download it. It's going to take an amount of time. Depends on how your network's doing. Mine's going pretty good. Yours might take a little longer, and that's perfectly fine. So just go ahead and let it download. So hopefully yours is starting to or has downloaded already. Now, once it's downloaded, we're going to go and start to go through the download steps. I'm going to start to go through them, but well, yeah, if yours is still downloading, I'm going to go through the steps pretty slow, so you'll be able to catch up. So, but let's go through these next steps. So assume your collector has downloaded. Now we're going to go ahead and, like I said, run through these steps. So to install it, I'm going to open it. This might depend, entirely on your OS and your rights and things like that. So I need to install this collector. There we go. My machine at Sumo is kind of locked down, so I have a couple screens where it's going to ask for permission, or it should. Where'd my little window go? Let's see. Mac OS M1. I don't know my Macs well enough, so I'm not going to. I'll need to check on that. I'm not sure if that it's included just under the regular Mac OS or not. And so this step is just, once again, my computer itself being secure, or trying to be. And now I have my setup wizard. And these steps are pretty straightforward. We're going to go through each one, but they're pretty straightforward in traditional setup wizards are. So click next. Terms and agreement, long legal stuff. So I'm just going to blindly agree to it. Click next. Then decide where I want to install this thing. So local spot is, or the end of the application directory is fine. Going to prepare to install. Yeah, take a few moments, extract files. Once again, we've all kind of seen application installed before, I hope. Now, here's where we're going to start to make some decisions or settings. So the first thing I want to point on this screen, and it's kind of small, I apologize if the font is small, but you should be looking at something similar, is the collector name. Now here, as you see, and hopefully see on yours, it inherited or just took the computer name. Now that computer name might be a good way for you to locate data. It might not be. For today, we do want you to modify it to may want you to modify it so that it's something clearer. So what you can do is you can go to advanced settings, and I could go ahead and modify this. So if yours just says computer or system or something very big, put your initials, a number, just something so that you know it's yours. We'll just make things a little bit easier when we go to look at those collectors in that collection screen shortly. You have other options here. We're not going to do anything with these today, but you can set things like time zone and just other features if you need to use proxies, and just I don't and we don't, so we're going to keep it simple. So assuming this screen looks okay and we remember our collector name, which you need to remember, go and click next. Now at this point, I need to go ahead and provide some sort of credentials and authentication for this collector to know that I am a user of Sumo. I'm about to send it data, but I need something to confirm that I am who I say I am. And so what we're going to do is utilize access keys here. We actually have two options on the screen, as you see here, a token and an access key. They both work fine. We use the access key as a recommendation We're going to go through that process. If you want to use the token, you can. Just the access key provides a little more benefit with the, well, we'll talk about what the benefit is in a moment. So I'm going to select access key and click next. Now I need to provide that access ID and access key. So how do you get that? So let's go ahead and do that together. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Sumo Logic again. I'm going to get out of this collection screen because I don't need to install collectors anymore. And what I'm going to do, there's a few different ways to do this. I'm going to show you the personal way to do it. What you're going to do is go down to the bottom left to your user. So it's going to say training admin, whatever number, and you're going to click on it. Then you're going to click on preferences. When you click on preferences, you should see this screen that says my access keys. You may have some access keys in here. You may not. It doesn't matter if you do, they're test ones. But you're going to want to create a new one. And so to create a new one, just click add access key. When you do, you want to give it a name. The name for today is pretty irrelevant. I'm going to use my initials and just call it JB test. That's enough. And then I'm going to click create key. Now, when I click create key, I'm going to get two pieces of information. I'm going to get an access ID and an access key. And both of these are going to be needed for the installation of the collector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my access ID and paste it in right here. Paste it in right there. Just make sure there's no leading space. And then I'm going to grab that access key and paste it in right there. Now, before I close the screen, the web screen, I'm going to click next because I just want to confirm I pasted those in correctly. I want to have it connect. So this should be kind of the last step. So I'm going to click next. It says, please hold while we connect to Sumo Logic. And so now it's trying to do two things. It's trying to connect to Sumo Logic and utilize those credentials or those keys to establish authenticity and authentication. So this should take about 30 seconds or so. And it should say, once it's done, click to finish. If it did not succeed, it would say error connecting. And then that might be an issue of maybe you put the access key and the ID in the wrong spot. Maybe you're having a firewall issue. Maybe, kind of maybe. A lot of maybes of what causes it. But hopefully it went through quite easily and you finished the installation. If you did, let me know. It'd be just helpful to hear someone get the click finish to exit set up. So hopefully you got here. Now I'm going to click finish. Cool. All right. Bunch of you got it. Now back to the access key and ID. I don't need these anymore. When I click done, actually the access key will be gone forever. The access ID will remain, but the access key will be gone. So if, and we don't really encourage this, but if you're the type of organization that does keep these type of keys, even if they're not living for long times in some sort of like locker vault, then you would want to, at this point, copy those to some sort of vault. But you can always not recreate, but regenerate new IDs and keys. These keys and IDs are also used for the API. So that's why they're, well, one of the other reasons why they're helpful. But assuming I don't need it anymore, then I click done. And then as I see here, I see the ID, but I can never see that key again. But if I needed a new one, I can just create a new one. All right. So hopefully we're there. I know that some of you are, which is great. And for those of you that are not, just let us know why not. It might just be time. It might still be downloading or what have you. Let's just make sure we got to the same place. So we installed it. We put the ID and key in. We generated that key. And now what I want to do is I want us to look for our collector, excuse me. So what I want us to do is I want us to go back to collection. So either go manage data collection, or you might have the collection screen still open. And I want us to now search for our collector or our computer name. And so what you should see is something that looks very similar to this with, of course, your name. So the name should be your name. It should be healthy. It should be an installed collector, and that's it. Which is good, that's it, but that's it. All right, so assuming everyone's there, and we think we're getting there, that's the step lab one. So we've now set up the collector. Now at this point, we've set up an agent, if you will, that's communicating with Sumo Logic. It's pinging back and forth, but it's not, there's nothing to send because we haven't given any instructions. So it's connected, it's alive, and that's about it. What we will do shortly is, and in the next lab, now send data through it, but we're not quite there yet. So that's where we are at the end of lab 1. All right, so now let's go to lab 2. So lab 2, what we want to do is we want to add a source. And so what we have is, in our scenario, we have that Apache access file that we downloaded, and now we want to go ahead and install it. Or not install it, well, yeah, install it or link it into Sumo Logic. Essentially collect it. So how do we do that? So here are the steps. Now, the first group of steps are kind of specific for Macs and also more specific depending on if your device is locked down. We at Sumo actually have an issue with employees, not just the program, where our devices, we have issues with, not issues, but access to the temp directory. So we have some extra steps to get to the temp directory. So this might be just unnecessary for you. And so if it is, that's fine. But essentially what we want to do is we want to locate that file that we downloaded, that Apache access file. So go ahead and look for it on your device. And if you already know where it is, that's fine. And now what I want to do is, we'll go through the steps, but continue with the lab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my collector, and I'm on the first line, which there really only should be one line for the collector. I'm going to click on add. And now I want to add a source. Now I can add many different types of data sources. I can add, and we are going to add a local file. And keep in mind, the file source is relative to where the collector is installed. So in this case, the collector is installed on my laptop, the Apache file is on my laptop, therefore it's local to each other. And so I want to do a local file. Later, when we go ahead and we want to set up metrics, we're going to use the host metrics. Well, that's lab 3. Lab 2, we're going to choose local file. And now what we're going to do is we're essentially going to fill in the blanks. First, we want to give this thing a name. This thing is data. What type of data is this data? It's Apache access data. So it's probably a pretty good name for it. I can call it whatever I want, but I want to make it something that's going to be clear to me and my organization. Now here, this is where it gets a little tricky. I'm going to specify the file path. So where is that Apache access log text file? Where is it on my device? Keep in mind, this is relative to your laptop or your personal device, so what directory? And as it says here, if you're using Windows, you need the UNC share path. And this is also where some people have issues. But let's see if it hopefully works. So I'm going to use, this works. All right, now we need to specify the source category. And if we're doing the labs, we should be up to right here. So now we need to specify the source category. So what type of data is this? Once again, we can use any source category we want, but we want to have it use some sort of naming convention. So in the example, we have you do, what do we have you do? prod/Apache access. You can keep that source category, or you can do something else if you want to do something different. I usually do my initials /Apache. And so what I'll do for the next source category, when we do metrics, I'll do JB/metrics. So I want to give it a source category. I could just call it JB, by the way. I could just call it network or firewall, but I want to use this tree or directory structure. So that's why I want to go ahead and utilize that second layer here, but I don't have to, but it's strongly encouraged to. All right. Now there's some other settings in here. We're not going to use them, but I'll just kind of mention them kind of quickly. Under the advanced option for logs. So you can do things like deny list, in that you can specify a specific file or you can specify a directory. With the deny list, you can exclude files that are in that directory. So that can be helpful if you have a directory of data. You can start to, I was going to say mess around, modify the timestamp and time zones. Maybe you want to specify a specific one. You can do that in here. And then you have some processing rules, which we're not going to use today. We actually should do a lab in the future on that, but for today we won't. So what's going to happen when I click save is this data is going to be saved and sent to the collector. And now the collector, once I click save, which I haven't, knows to look in this directory and start to label data as such. And what I'm going to do here, just to see if this works properly, is I'm going to test by doing a live tail. The live tail is going to tell me or show me data as it arrives into Sumo Logic. So I'm going to click run here. I'm now going to save this. And now I'm going to cross my fingers and hope this worked properly. Now I don't see anything yet, so that's not a great sign. I feel like I have a typo somewhere, but that's okay. So what you can do is you can use this live tail method, or what we encourage you to do, as the lab shows, is actually go ahead and look at the data. What you should be able to do now is you now have a second line here, which has that information about the Apache data. It has the name. Oops, sorry, I need to click on that. It has the it has the name of the data, it has the status, it has the source category, and what should start to populate is the amount of messages. Now I can also view the log messages by going to the right of this source category and clicking on it. Now this brings me into a query, and I should get data. I think I'm having that issue that was in the lab about the temp directory. I think I messed that up. Curious if any of you guys got it working. If you did, great, of course. If you didn't, we can try again. Let me try it. Find your bill. Let's see. All right, so was anybody able to view their data in Sumo? All right, not yet. All right, so it still isn't there. And it can take a few moments, of course. All right, cool. So Todd got it. Oh, he's on Linux. All right, that's no, not that that matters, but I mean that's good that it showed up, showing off a little with the Linux. Kidding about showing off, but that's great. Yeah, I think that. So are we on? Do we have to move the Apache file to the temp directory? Yeah, I think that's where it's getting a little messed up. Is you got to take that file, save it, move it to the temp directory. Save that. Oops, let's see. Copy it. Paste this in. And let me just rename this because I don't like that having that one. All right, I think that will work now. It should grab it. The question was, where were you supposed to get the data from? In the lab itself. So in lab one, the first step is this before you begin. So just click on that file or right click and save it. It depends on your system's download settings. Okay, cool. Now I'm getting data. Cool. So now what I should be able to do is now click on this guy and where is it? And it's there. One last try. I don't want to waste too much time having it showing this. It should come in now. I don't know. It came in. It processes, but the processing should be quick. I don't know. I'll look at it at break. I don't, like I said, I don't want to tie up too much time. Hopefully you got further along than I did. So I'll just pause for another moment or two. Yeah, some like Krista, you have 310 folders on your Mac. Yeah, I am far from a Mac expert, so this is where I'm a little out of my wheelhouse. Yeah. All right. So hopefully you got your data. If you didn't, that's fine. We're not really. We're done with the log. So if you're done with lab 2 either way. So we're not really going to go back to that log file. So don't worry about it. Lab 3 is going to be easier. Lab 3, we're going to have the collector do something for us, but this one's going to require less effort, which is good. So what we're going to do in lab 3 is we're going to go ahead and collect metrics. So in lab 2, we did logs. Lab 3, we're going to grab metrics. So what are we talking about when we're talking about metrics? Well, we're talking about your devices. I hate to use the word metrics again, but your CPU usage, your disk usage, your networking usage, your et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and set it up. And it's the same process virtually. And so let's take a look at it. So we're going to go into Sumo Logic. We're going to go back to our collection. I'm just going to refresh here just to. Oh, there we go. Hey, data. Oh, error. Let's see. And now I can see what's wrong here. So here, error. Let's see what is wrong. Yeah, it's with my path. So that was the issue of why I was having an error, was my path is all messed up. In fact, it should refresh to showing correct. So a little kind of cool thing you can play with there is actually seeing why you have errors. You probably know why I have an error in this case, but it's helpful. What I want to do here, though, is I wanted to add source, because now I want to add another source of data. Now, in this case, I don't want to do a local file. I want to do metrics. And so I'm just going to select host metrics. Once again, I'm going to give it a name. The name doesn't, I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter too much. I'm going to just call mine JB host metrics. Oop, there we go. And now I'm going to need to specify a source category. I'm going to use my JB as that kind of root directory, and I'm going to use /host. I think in the lab we have you type out something a little more elaborate, but it's the same end result, so don't worry about it too much. Now, the scan interval. We get to decide how frequently do we want our device scanned for metrics and those metrics sent to Sumo Logic. Very frequently, every 10 seconds, not so frequently, 5 minutes. There's pros and cons. The more frequent the call is, or so if the shorter the frequency, the more data is going to be sent over. Data is going to be sent over every 10 seconds versus every 5 minutes. The benefit of it going to sent over more frequently is it gets there faster. So in this case, I want to select 10 seconds for a few reasons. One, because I don't want to wait 1 or 5 minutes for the data to show up. I want it right away. The other is I don't really care about billing because I'm not being billed for this and neither are you. So let's get the data there urgently. And then we need to select what metrics do we want. By default, CPU and memory are checked, but you can uncheck them, you can modify them, and each broader topic has kind of sub metrics in it. So for example, with CPU, do I want the CPU user? Do I want the CPU sys, the CPU idle time, the CPU IO, this, et cetera, et cetera. With the memory, all these. Now, once again, I am not paying for this, nor are you. So I'm going to say, give me all my metrics. It might be more expensive for Sumo, but that's not my problem right now. So I want all my metrics. When I click save, these settings are now sent to the collector. And now the collector knows, hey, look for Apache data, also look for host metric data. And hopefully you're up to this step now. So at this point, we should have ideally 2 sources of data, both showing healthy. Ideally, if the Apache one isn't, that it's fine. And now what we're going to do is we're going to see the data. Or we're going to see if we can see the data. So the way we're going to do that is very similar to the way we did the logs, excuse me, is we're going to go to the line where metrics are. We're going to go to the source category. To the right of it is going to be an icon. The icon is going to be a little different. This is the metrics icon versus the logs. But when I click in open in metrics, I should see some metrics. And now I do. Now I'm starting to see information about my net in packets, my net out packets, and et cetera. And hopefully you see those as well. And hopefully that was easier as well, because there's less things to do. The system knows where the metrics are, and so we just grab them. All right, so let's see. That should conclude lab 3. It doesn't completely conclude lab 3 because there's just one last lab or portion here, which is an app. Hopefully you're aware of our apps. I keep saying hopefully you're aware of these things, and I hope you are. If you're taking the admin class, usually you've taken something prior, but if you haven't, apps are going to be really helpful. Apps are going to be a way for you to take queries and dashboards that an employee of Sumo has created, or possibly an outside individual, and utilize them within Sumo on overlay your data. And we're going to use the host metrics app right now. So the scenario is we have these metrics coming into the system. All right, cool. Now, hopefully I know what a bridge O and an N4 metric of net out packets are, but if I don't, and even if I do or don't, this app is going to give me a really good visual indication of all the data related to my metrics. So let's go ahead and set one up. Quite easy to set up. On the left-hand side of the screen, I'm going to go ahead and click on App Catalog. If the black bar is hidden, and now I'm going to look for an app called Host Metrics. Probably easier just to type host in the query box. It's also in alphabetical order, but looking for host metrics. Not the host process metrics, that's something else. We're going to use host metrics. And now I'm going to, as it shows here, it's going to give me these dashboards, but now we're going to set them up and you'll see how easy it is to do. I'm going to click Add to Library. And now I'm going to give the app a name. In most cases, this app name is sufficient. I would encourage you to just put your initials just in case we are overlapping with somebody else in our training account. So put your initials or a number or just something semi-unique. And now we need to specify our source category. So where are we install, or where did we install those host metrics to? What source category? Once I have that filled in, I'm going to click Add to Library. Now what the system is doing is taking or referencing those metrics at JB/host, referencing these queries that somebody at Sumo has created, and putting the two together. And what I now get is the output. So for example, if I go to my host metrics overview, and imagine I know nothing about metrics or what they represent, I am now seeing my CPU idle time, my CPU load times, and et cetera, et cetera. And now I get all this insight into my metrics, my device, how it's being utilized, and maybe do something. If I see this spiking to 99%, then maybe I set up an alert or do something like that. But that's what this is showing. So apps are great in Sumo Logic. So anytime you have any set of data that's new to you, I would encourage installing an app over it and seeing what the data presents to you, or what the graphical representation presents to you. Is this going to always be exactly the output and the dashboards you need? No. Is it going to be probably 90% of the time? Yeah. And so just a really great place, easy place to start. So that's something I would encourage. Unrelated to admin even, it's just the apps in general. It's just the benefits of them. All right, let's see where we're at. We're just about going to take a break in a moment or two. Let's see. So we should be done with lab 3. Yeah, so we're done with lab 3. Let's see, let me go back to my deck. Let me just see, I think we can take a break now. Yeah, let's take a break now. Let's do we're doing pretty good on time. We'll do the normal 10-minute timer. So we're going to take a 10-minute break now. Do whatever you need to do, grab a snack, grab a beverage, but we'll come back. We'll do a few more labs, a few more slides, a few more labs. And then once we're done with that, we'll, there we go. Sorry about that. So 10-minute timer starting now. Grab a snack, grab a beverage. We'll come back. We'll do a few more slides, a few more labs, and then we'll take the exam and should have you out of here before 7. So a little bit earlier. So let's go ahead. When did our break start here? There we go. 10-minute timer starting now. And so if there's any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. Odell and I, both going to step away for a few minutes to stretch, but we'll come back, we'll finish up and complete the day. So thank you everybody for attending. Hopefully you found so far kind of helpful, and we'll see you all in a few minutes. Thank you. All right, there we go. Oh, there. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully a good break. We're going to go ahead and continue. So let's see any questions. I think we're pretty clear. Yeah, so let's go ahead and finish up. So let me go ahead and back into my deck here. Okay. So what I want to talk about next are some optimization tools that would exist within Sumo Logic. Some of these are going to be things that I strongly encourage you to use. Some of these are going to be things that I just want you to understand conceptually, and maybe when the time comes, you'll use them. So we have, I think, four of them in here. So let's start to take a look at them. Now we've broken these optimization tools into two groupings, field-based and index-based. Field-based are, as the name sort of implies, going to help with field-related data, where index-based is going to help more from an index standpoint. So the field-based are going to help us understand our data, our field, our structure of how those fields are created, how the fields are parsed. The index-based is going to relate more to how the data is contained and indexed, hence index-based. Now, this first one, hopefully you know about. If you don't know about, somebody at Sumo is not doing their job. But the first one is the field browser. This is a feature that shows up when you do a log search, specifically when you go to the messages tab. And what it shows, as it shows here, are many different fields and values associated with those fields. So for example, the second line here where it says IP_address, this is telling us that within this set of data, within this query, the field IP_address shows up. So the system knows what an IP address is, and it has found 18 of them. So it's trying to tell us the quantity or the count of the field. Now, I'm going to show it just in app. Shows much better in app versus out of app. But basically, if I go to a set of data, I don't know, set of data like that sounds kind of familiar. And I'll do last 3 hours just to make sure I get that data. And what I should now start to see are these hidden fields. These hidden fields represent those fields that Sumo Logic is aware of within the set of data. And those fields by default are going to consist of metadata fields that you probably have heard about already, such as collector, such as source, such as more specifically, not more specific, but in addition, source category. And so now my field browser is representing or showing me what data it has found. And it's going to allow me to utilize these fields in my searches. So let me clarify. So for example, let's say I'm looking at this set of data and I want to look just, assume this is a random set of data, and I want to look just at this specific value, just JB/Apache. In fact, let me do this way. So many ways to handle this. See, this should work. All right, didn't show the metrics, which is fine. But what I can now see is if I select this value, it's automatically going to now look just for that set of data. So the field browser allows me to interact with the query as well. So, yay, field browser. It's just a good way to make it a little bit easier to understand your data and utilize some of those fields by simply just clicking on them. All right. So that's the field browser. Now, field extraction rules are going to help you with your field-based information as well. Field extraction rules are going to allow you or somebody in your organization, this is an RBAC thing, this can be controlled by administrative rights, but it can allow somebody in the organization to create a rule that's going to apply to your data and parse it automatically. So for example, let me see, how can I show a good example of this? Okay, here's a okay example of this. Not the best, but it's good enough. If I go to source category equals JB/Apache, I see that Apache data, that we ingested earlier in lab 1 or lab 2. And I see my field browser. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to a different set of Apache data. Type there, lab/Apache/access. When I go to this set of data, when I go to my field browser, you'll notice, since I'm telling you to notice it, I now have those fields that I mentioned earlier, the collector, the source category, the source, but now I have these other fields. I have a field for source IP, which is a part of the data that's within the Apache data. I have a field for status code. I have a field for size and method and all these other things. And so what's occurring is the system is automatically parsing our data for us based on our request, based on our field extraction rules that we've set in place. We can view these field extraction rules. Once again, in the real world, this is admin controlled. But if I go to manage data and logs, I should have a field extraction rule header or grouping. In here, it shouldn't take long to load. There's really nothing to load. There we go. So you know what? For some reason it's showing all blank here. I'm having a display issue, not a Sumo issue. Cool, there we go. What I now see are some rules that have been set up. And one of the rules that has been set up is this Apache access rule. What this rule is doing is looking for source category lab Apache access. It's looking for this set of data. If it finds a set of data, it's going to apply this parse expression that we have created. We being you, we being us, somebody has created. And then when it finds that data, it's going to extract these fields. And that's why we have those fields visible to us in that field browser. Now, why else are we going to go ahead and do field extraction rules? What's the benefit of this? Oh, there's a question. What did I do to make those show up? What I did to show the field extraction rules, and you might not have access to this. I can't remember if it gave you access, but you'll go to manage data and you'll go to logs. And then there should be field extraction rules. And then I just can't remember if we give you access or not. Actually, you do have access. I'm in the same account you are. You'll click add rule and you'll be able to see them. So manage data, logs, field extraction rules. And then if you want to add one, you can. Now, why do we do these? Well, a few different reasons. One is for better performance. Since we're using these field extraction rules, we are parsing at the time of ingestion. So when the data comes in, the parsing is done automatically. Since that's occurring, we don't have to parse within the query. Since we don't have to parse within the query, we have less lines in our query. Since our query is shorter, it's faster. And so speed might not be light years, but it's technically going to be faster. It's standardized field names, because now you or whoever's setting up these rules is saying, call this thing an IP, or call this thing an IP underscore address, or call the source IP. You get to decide the names. And you have simplified searches. Now, when you get your data back, you could say, show me source IP equal to 1.2.3.4. And so it provides for a simpler search. So field extraction rules strongly encourage you to use them. Once again, like I've mentioned with other features, hopefully these aren't a surprise to you. Maybe as an admin they are, but hopefully you're using these already. Best practices, you want to build simple, specific rules. You want to test them. That's kind of obvious that you want to test them, but you do want to test them. There is a limit of 50 rules, 200 fields that can be bumped up. So if you do need to increase that, which we've done for our training account, just email support and they can increase it. But it's a pretty good baseline rule. And then not all operators are supported. Question, Mark, are you having a problem finding the field extraction rules? So once again, we should be in Sumo, of course. Go to the far left, go to manage data, and then go to logs to field extraction rules. So hopefully you're seeing them. And once again, if you don't see them in your production account, you might not have access. Manage data, logs, field extraction rules. All right, cool. Back to the deck again. All right, so those were some field-based, we call them optimizations, which they are, but that's what those were. I don't know that this one's really an optimization, but I guess it is. It's certainly, yeah, I guess it is. Now I want to talk about partitions. I mentioned these earlier. You may be familiar with partitions. The idea of partitioning data is not, once again, new to Sumo Logic. Um, um, oh, Mark, just the other thing. What he was getting and what I was getting earlier is this was all blank. What I did is I just refreshed the page and then it kind of restored. So I don't know why I was doing the blank view. So yeah, I would just try to refresh. So the partition. So what partitions are is a way to partition, I hate to use the word definition, but group or split up different types of stuff, in this case, data. By default, all data is going to be stored in a single partition or a single index called DCP, or default continuous partition, which is fine. You can have all your data go to one bucket, and that's, like I said, just perfectly fine. Now, when you do a query, your query is going to go to that big bucket and look through all the data and kind of find what it needs and retrieve it. And that, like I said, that's perfectly fine. That's the way Sumo works. That's the way many systems work. But what you can do is you can set up these partitions, these additional indexes that have subsets of your data or groupings of your data. So for example, what I have on the screen is I have my DCP, or my default continuous partition, with everything except for my production data, my dev data, and my QA data. So maybe this DCP is holding my sales data and accounting or whatever. It doesn't matter what's in there. But the benefit of doing these partitions is a few benefits, but really the main, actually, there's two major benefits, three major benefits, actually. One is performance. So let's say you have 1 terabyte of data and you put it all into that general index. When you search against 1 terabyte of data, your query looks at 1 terabyte of data. And like I said, sorts, sifts through it, finds what it needs and brings back. But let's say you then have these sub buckets and you have your production data is only maybe 10 gigs of data. When you search in the production partition or the production bucket, you're then just looking through 10 gigs of data versus a terabyte of data. And so since it's looking through less data, it's going to return quicker and performance is going to be improved. Once again, it might not be light years, it might be milliseconds, but it will be faster. Another benefit, and this is a newer one, is you can have different periods of retention for these buckets. So you could, based on probably legal or accreditation or certification reasons, you might need to store data at different periods. Maybe production data you can keep for a year, but your dev data needs to be deleted every 6 months. You can set that as a rule, and quite easily using these partitions, these groupings. The other thing you can do, and this is really, I don't know that the partition does, it's really the source category, but you can then group your data of who can access which partition if you wanted to. But so that's the benefit, is putting your data into sub buckets and then making it quicker to search those sub buckets. This is something that I would not encourage you to right away say, go, let's create 100 partitions. You now know they exist. And if you have a project or a reason to create a new one, you can. And once again, if you're working with Sumo Logic to set up an account, these are the conversations we should be having with you of, what are your plans? Do partitions make sense here or not? So the question was, is there a way to combine the same query performed on different partitions? Yeah, I'll keep that as a short answer. Yeah, but basically you could say only search on this partition, search on all of them. You do have that ability. The partition, let me see if I can show it to you. So here I have some partitions and I can search on them. So here, for example, I have a partition for my CloudTrail data. And so I can go ahead and look at the index name or partition name. And so I could say, look at this index and that one, and so on and so forth. So Stacy, I think to answer your question, the simple answer is yes, we can. Yeah. All right. Cool. Let's go back to lab slides rather, excuse me. A few more slides here, not too many more. Oh, actually, we do have some more. But let's go over this last one. This is scheduled views. This is also not a feature that I would encourage you to use right away, but be aware that it exists. What scheduled views allows you to do is create a query and have it run periodically in the background. So for example, let's say you have a query that you run on a regular basis, and it's a large query. It takes a long time to return. Now, long time is relative. It could be a minute might be long to you, but that, if you deem a minute to be a long time, that's a long time. What this scheduled view allows you to do is take that query and save it as a scheduled view. And as mentioned, that query is going to run in the background every minute. So every minute the query is going to run, the results are going to be retrieved and saved to that scheduled view. The next minute the query is going to run again, the new results will be saved to that query, and so on and so forth. And what you can do is you can then call that view by using the underscore view equals, not a source category, but a view name. And so what this is allowing you to do is basically see results quickly. They might be delayed by a minute, that is a caveat, but they are going to be quicker. And so if you're scanning for 6 months worth of data, you probably don't care that it doesn't have the last minute's worth of data in it, but it does return quickly. And that's what the scheduled view is going to allow you to do, is let it run quickly in the background. Not something, I mean, many customers do use it, many don't. Just want to introduce it as a thing. So just wanted to bring it up. All right. And scheduled views can be found kind of the same way as partitions. Here's your scheduled view. Here, I don't really have any. Here's one that Don created recently. So here I have a scheduled view that's looking at the past 3 days of worth of data and is consuming 9 gigs. And now when I run this query, it returns in 1 second because it's taking the last minute's data. So it's now old data delayed by a minute, which might be fine, but it is showing me that. And these things, once again, on top, you may or may not have access to based on admin rights. And we're about to talk about that, those admin rights in just a moment. In fact, now let's talk about those. And let's actually talk about many different, these are going to be other features and just other settings, other things within Sumo Logic. So I'm going to use the slides probably just for a few of them, but then I'll probably just go into the app and show it to you. The first thing I want to show is the account overview. You can view this by going to, where did we move it to? Administration and account. Sorry, it's always been there. So this account overview, it's going to give you kind of what you might expect, an overview of your account. In that, it's going to show you some information about the billing period, how much ingestion you've purchased, how much metrics you've purchased, how much you're using, and other things like that. It's a good way to start to see your utilization. I'm going to show you a better way, but this is certainly a good simple snapshot of your utilization. The next tab I want to show in account, under administration other account, is data management. This one you're going to want to check. What this is going to allow you to do is enable data volume. And what data volume tracking is going to allow you to do is view your data volume. So it's basically going to tell the system, start recording data volume, and you can then access that. And we're going to access it in a lab in a few moments. But what it will allow you to do is start to see what apps or what's using your data. You're using a gig's worth of data in Sumo. Is it all Apache data? Is it all O365 data? You're going to be able to see that. And like I said, we'll look at an example of that in just a few moments. But this is something you will want to check. So I think it's off by default in your environments in production. And so you do, like I said, just want to make sure it is checked. Now, when it's checked, it's going to allow you to take advantage of the apps. Specifically, there's going to be a data volume app, and we're going to look at that in a few moments. So that's one reason why we want you to utilize that data volume feature, is to then utilize the data volume app to then view your data. And there's 2 apps that we're going to look at today. Actually, I mean, we looked at the host metrics already, so that was the first one, but there's 2 other. The 2 others are going to be data volume and audit. Data volume, as just mentioned, and we're going to do a lab with it in a moment, is going to allow us to look at data usage. The audit app, or the audit app is going to allow us to look at our audit usage as to what people are doing. Because that's also a common question, is what source categories is this individual accessing, and other stuff. And we're going to look at that in a moment as well in an example. So these are features we'd encourage you to enable. The auditing is going to be important because we want you to enable it so it starts collecting the actions that a user is doing before that becomes a need. So it's something we encourage you to turn on right away. And I'll show it to you in the system as well as where to turn it on. All right, let's see. Let's go. We'll go through a few more slides here. Ingest budget monitoring and control. So ingest budgets are something that the newer feature for Sumo. What this allows you or somebody to do in your organization is start to monitor and control, hence the name, their ingest budget. So how much are they allowed to bring into the system? How much data can I collect? Do you want somebody collecting 100 terabytes of data? No, probably not. Maybe if that's all good data, but you probably want to have some sort of limit because somebody in your organization is probably paying for the amount of data you use. So somebody's going to be concerned about that. And so this starts to let you create rules based on things we've talked about as far as different groups, different users, different sets of data that can be controlled. Maybe your QA data you limit to a gig a day, but your production data, let it ride as much as it takes or as much as you need. And so you can start to fine tune those. The health monitor, I actually showed this as an example unintentionally earlier. This is a newer feature. This allows you to start to look at the events that are taking place and the health of them. So earlier when I was having that issue with my collector, I essentially went to manage data monitoring and I saw in my health events that there's these issues. It looks like Krista was having an issue earlier with her collector. Not to call her out specifically, but this is now the insight we get, and this is quite useful. I can look at this and now, she's having problems with her collector. Maybe it's the path, maybe it's whatever, but you're starting to see this information. So as much information that we can provide to an admin as useful is going to be in here. And we're adding more stuff. This health events is a newer, it's been around probably for a year now, but a newer feature. So it's really been pretty helpful. All right, let's talk about global security settings. So within Sumo Logic now, if you go to, where is this? This is going to be administration and security. I'm going to go over these options and I'll just go over them in app. The first one is password policy. Pretty typical to any other password policy in the world. When does it expire? What type of words or letters can you use? Can't you use? How many attempts? Things like that. If you don't have a password policy, the default is good. If you do, I'd probably encourage you to modify it to your own password policy, but pretty straightforward. The access keys. So earlier we created access keys, but this allows you as an administrator to see where those access keys, or not see where they are, but get information about who created them and when. So here, for example, I see the access key, I see the ID, I see who created it. Access keys live after the user leaves. So in this case, this user might have left the company for whatever reason, but we can still continue to utilize his credentials, which can be helpful. So users can create their own access keys by going to training or going to the name and preferences, but as an administrator, you can view all access keys by going to administration and security. Once again, assuming you have access to access keys, and we still need to talk about RBAC or role-based access control. Under policies, here's this first one that I was actually the first two. Really, the first one is more important. This is that enabling the audit records. So encourage you to check this. And I'd encourage you to check the first two, really. This middle one, I want to point out, it's not checked by default, but it's going to be important if you ever contact support. So what this allows us to do on your behalf is by checking this box, it essentially creates a new user in your account called Sumo Support, essentially. And what it allows is our support team to use that user to log into your account and actually see your environment and your interface of, these are your settings and all that. If this is not checked, they still have some access to look on the back end to see what you're doing, but it's hard for them to see. So this allows them an easy view into your system. Once you're done with the support call, you can uncheck it and it then removes that access. But typically when you call support, this is probably gonna be the first thing they ask you to do. So I wanna point it out. So if you don't want to leave it checked all the time, that's fine. Just remember kind of where it is. Let's see what else we got on here. Share dashboards outside the org. So by checking this, you can allow users to share a dashboard with view-only privileges to anybody outside the organization, which is kind of powerful. What else we got? Per user concurrent session limit. Not super important. It was important enough for us to build. So if you want to limit the amount of concurrent sessions a user can have, this is built for you. And then user session timeout, so kind of web timeout. SAML. So we strongly encourage you to use SAML or some sort of SSO. If you don't, of course, you can set up the password policy, but SAML just makes it easy because then a user doesn't have to remember a password. They have a little icon they click on and they get brought right into Sumo. So just if you can use SAML or some sort of SSO, please do. Installation tokens. So this is where that token can be set up. Remember earlier we did the access key, but we had the option to do a token. We could have done the token from here. As you see, it's didn't spell test right. It's pretty straightforward. It gives us the token, but I wanted to show the access keys because that, like I said earlier, that's useful for the API. So you'll use it a little bit more. All right, I think that takes us through those slides. Now, finally, RBAC. So RBAC stands for Role-Based Access Control, and within it, you have the ability to start to give users different rights. What I want to talk about first is adding a new user, and it's very straightforward. To add a new user, you're going to fill out the screen you see here. We need a first name, we need a last name, and we need an email. And we need roles. And if you don't select roles, there will be a default role applied, but you also have the roles, and I'll show you how to set up those roles in a few minutes. The reason you want to use an access key is the access key works better with the APIs. So that's the main reason. Tokens might work with the APIs now, but I don't think so. I can't recall. So adding new user. Now there's two roles in the system by default. An administrator role, which is like it sounds like a God role almost. You can manage users, manage roles, manage collectors, and then the analyst role where you have full access to your data, but no user and collector management. And so in the real world, that might be why in your Sumo, you have access to do your queries, but you might not see some of those collector screens or those log setting screens or things like that, because once again, you might be defined as an analyst and you just are not granted that permission. But those are the default roles. You can create more. So what you have is the ability to select what you want the user to do. This screenshot is actually a little bit older. There's more capabilities now, but do you want people in this role managing collectors? Do you want them viewing collectors? Do you want them managing connections? And so on and so forth. And so you can start to get granular with what they can or cannot do. What you can also do with roles is start to utilize the source category and start to utilize a search filter. So what I could do here and what I did in this example is I created a role called Apache only. And what this role has is access to the source category Labs Apache star. They can access Lab Apache data. They can access Lab Apache all day. They can't access production Apache data. They can't access Lab O365 data. They're very locked down in what set of data they can access. And so that might be important to you from a security standpoint, from a probably more of a security standpoint. You don't want people looking at data they shouldn't. And so this is how you can start to segment it. And that's why using the source category becomes even more helpful, because with the source category and a proper component or folder or directory structure, you can start to use the wildcards to kind of fill in those blanks. Otherwise, if you were doing this by collector, you'd have to do a list of collectors. It would just be annoying. Possible, but just annoying. All right, that's it for RBAC. Yeah, I thought there was another slide, but that's it for RBAC. One more slide. I think this is the last one. And then we'll go do those labs pretty quickly. Is content sharing. What I wanted to remind you of here is the ability, one, to share content in general. Hopefully you're aware of that ability for you to take your dashboards, your queries, and share them with other people in your org. If you created something, somebody else can probably benefit from that. And so we stress the importance of sharing really in all our classes. I think pretty much all of them go over the sharing ability. So I didn't really want to introduce that. I feel like you should know about that. What I did want to introduce here is the ability for you to create, or an admin, to create a admin recommended bucket, essentially, or folder in the library. With the idea being, as an admin, you can put those things that are recommended. So as a new user, you come into Sumo, you might see in your personal folder what you have. Then you'd want to go to this library and see, oh, let me check out this get started, or whatever might be in here. And so this is a way to call out just things that might be helpful. It doesn't have to be called admin recommended. That's just what it can be called. You can call it whatever you want. As we did here, we have get started, but it's going to give you that ability of someplace to look. So always helpful to send new users to someplace that without you telling them. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do lab 4 and 6. Oh, question was, yeah. Let me, very good question. So the question was, where are the RBAC settings? Well, we intentionally did not give you access to the RBAC settings because if we did, you could change your settings to what access you have and modify them. I'll show you, actually I could do it right now. I'll show you what they look like. Let me log in as my an admin, a real admin of the training account. Not a real admin, a full access, and show it to you. Good question though. I'm gonna log in with my, I think I had a typo. Sorry about that. I should put myself on mute there. All right, so what were we talking about? RBAC. So I'm going to go in here to, where am I going? To administration, and then I have users and roles, which you guys do not. So when I go to users and roles, here are my users, and here are my roles. And so here are just a bunch of roles that we've created for whatever reason, and starting to control what they can do, what they can view, and so on. So that's where it would show up. Good question, Mark. Yeah, so you can't do it because we didn't want you to give yourself too much access. All right. Is it possible to clone a role? No. The API might allow you to do that, actually. So we do have an API. We don't go over it today at all. But the API has a lot of capabilities, and copying roles should be something it allows you to do. So I'm pretty sure that is possible, just not in the UI itself. All right, so let's do our labs. Good question, Krista. So Krista's question is, can the app catalog show us what apps you're already using? Unfortunately not. All it's going to show are those apps that are available. It doesn't show you just specifically what is available for your data. But that's a good idea, a great idea, which I assume we're working on at some point. Great question. All right, so let's go ahead and now go back to our lab guide. And I'll put this in the chat just in case you don't have it anymore. Shouldn't have gone that far. What we want to do is we want to install the audit app. So it's going to be the same process we did earlier. I just like to show it because it's simple, it's effective as well. And I think we'll do the data volume as well. So let's go to install the audit app. So we're going to go to our app catalog. And once again, we're going to look for audit. We just want the one called audit. The other ones are just not related to what we need for right now. We're just going to use the simple audit one. And we're going to click add to library. It's going to show us these previews, which are great, and we want them. For add to library, we're going to give the app a name. So once again, I'm going to, as I've been doing, put my initials. In this case, I don't need to tell the system where the audit data is. It knows where it is. So we don't need to specify source category or anything like that. We just click add to library. And when we do, now we get the output of our audit logs. And so now doing nothing, you basically saw me do it. I didn't really do anything. Now I can go ahead and start to view this audit activity. So let's look at the account management overview. Probably a good place to start. Now I'm starting to see where people are logging in from over the last 24 hours. So admin activities. What are you guys doing? All right, cool. You're just accessing and creating keys. Nothing I need to get you in trouble for, whatever. Admin activities, so on and so forth. I get this information, and now I see what my users are doing. And so, like I said, simple to set up. You can go into, if you go back to your library and go to your audit, and then if you want to select something else, it doesn't matter. User activity. And so now I'm starting to see this, and I assume, some of you, oh, there's last 24 hours, so it could be our morning class, but there's people from Australia and all this. And if I don't have anybody from Australia in my company, but somebody's logging in, that could be a security issue. And it's giving me this insight right away. And like you saw, I didn't do much to do it. I clicked on the word audit. Now, what we want to do here, and as alluded to earlier with the sharing of the importance of it, is now sharing this app. So if you know how to share one, you already know how to do this. But what I wanted to do is show you how to share it. There's a few different ways to share it. I'm going to do it through the black nav bar. I'm going to go to the app, so in my personal folder, and I'm going to click on the 3 dots. I can share the whole app. I could share just the dashboard, but then I can just decide who I want to share this with. So I can share this with my entire organization. I can share it with specific roles based on RBAC. I can share it with specific users based on name and combinations. So I could share it with Andrea and my analyst. And what we would encourage you to do is notify them by email. You can put what access they have. Do they have view access, edit access, advanced access? Many gets quite granular here. But what I'd encourage you to do is include a note in an email. And so sharing audit stats or whatever. And so then you click share, the individual gets an email. Now they know, hey, Josh has just shared this user activity data. It must be important. Let me go check it out. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the data volume map. Same process. You kind of even know what the output's going to look like, but just want to show it to you because for somebody in your organization, data volume is going to be important. It might not be you, but somebody that's paying the bills is probably going to care about it. Just because that's why we added it, somebody requests. What we're going to do here is we're going to go to the app catalog again, but this time we're going to look for data volume. For this, we're just going to select the regular one, and I'm just going to click add to library like I've been doing. I'm going to put my initials. I don't need to specify where the data is because once again, the system knows it already. It's going to do its magic. And now it's going to pop out a query. And now let's look at the data volume overview. And now it's going to start to show me ingestion by the day, by the source category. Here, this source category, the SE demo is using a lot of data and the other ones aren't. Is this okay or not? In this case, it is. It's paid for, but maybe it isn't. Maybe I need to talk to the manager and say, why are you using this much data? Maybe I need to enforce an ingest budget rule that says, these guys can only use 20 gigs. If they need more, they need to get it approved, et cetera. So all this is giving us just more valuable information that you or somebody in your organization is going to want to know about. All right, so let's see. The app's free. Yep, absolutely free apps. And so when we say apps, we're just meaning a query or dashboard that we created and you can overlay. So, but yep, absolutely free. If you're missing any as well, either let us know or just keep an eye out. These get updated all the time. There's about 200 in here or so. Maybe not that many, but we add new ones just as more popular file formats come out. Or not file formats, log formats. Or not just log formats because it can be metrics when popular formats come out. All right, let's go back to the labs because I think we're done with the labs. Yep, so we're done with lab 4. How do you get back to the audit console once it closed? So I assume by audit console, you mean the audit app. And so if you go to your personal folder, you should have your audit folder, and then you would find the specific console or dashboard you need. So I think that's what you're referring to, Andrew. If not, let me know and we can clarify a little bit more. All right, going back to the lab. So we're done with lab 4. Lab 5, we're going to skip. Lab 5 is just having us play with the data we just ingested, which that's really what we do in Search Mastery. So we're not going to do that. But we're going to do lab 6, or at least look at lab 6. Lab 6 is, the query is a bit robust, but it's a good way to finish up today. What Lab 6 is going to have us do or have us set up is an alert. And powerful alerts allow you to stay out of Sumo Logic, but still benefit. What we want to do here is we want to set an alert based on data ingestion when it reaches a specific threshold. And so that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to do it through a query. Don't get too bogged down in the query itself. It's probably a little overkill for an admin class. Conceptually, I guess I just want you to understand it. And actually, for being honest, you can really do most of this in the data volume app, just modifying one of those queries and turning it into an alert. But still, let's go through this kind of quickly. So what we want to do is we want to set up an alert that's going to notify us when our data usage has reached a certain threshold. So as mentioned, maybe somebody in our organization cares when we're reaching thresholds for our data. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this query and just copy it. And then I'm going to do a new log search and paste it. And like I said, I'll go through sort of quickly through this because it does get a bit in the weeds. But conceptually, what we're doing is first we're calling the index for the Sumo Logic volume. So this is where that data, that volume data is stored by default. Specifically, the source category of collector volume. So we're just telling what data to look at. We're using regex here. We're saying, look at that data and then parse it into fields. A field for collector, a field for bytes, a field for count, because we want to start to figure out how much data is being used by each part of the system, in this case, each source category, or each collector, excuse me, we do this for collectors. Now, what I'm doing next, I should probably comment off a bunch of these lines and go by them one by one, but I really don't want to take that much time with it, but I guess I should. I'm taking, so let's run the first three lines. So what I should get now is collection data, and I should start to see the amount of data that's being utilized. And let me go ahead and refresh here because it's displaying a little bit weird. Let's run this again. Okay, cool. So what I'm now starting to see is my log data, the collector, and how much space the collector is using in gigabytes. I'm now going to, or actually, excuse me, it was in bytes, and then I'm going to convert it into gigabytes. What I'm then going to do is say, take all those different log messages and add them all up, which is going to show me the gigabytes per a collector. So how much data is each collector utilizing? Now, the data, we just don't have much data in here. So that's why if we had larger numbers, it would kind of show up a little bit better. We just don't have much data in here, but we can sort by gigabytes and start to see which is the most amount of data. Now what we want to do is we want to figure out the total gigabytes as today's volume. So what we're doing is basically saying, add up all the gigabytes to figure out how much space are we using. We then want to say 100 is our plan size or our limit. So how much space are we allowed, or how much are we paying for, do we want to utilize for that day? And then what we're starting to do here is start to figure out how much space compared to the plan size or the volume size are we utilizing. And this is where, like I said, start to get in the weeds a little bit. Our data isn't high enough to really show good values. They're just going to show up as 0.00 percentages, but we're starting to see how much percent each collector is utilizing. And then ultimately what we're doing, excuse me, is we're then going to go ahead and say, look at today's volume and compare it to the plan size. So essentially, how much space are we utilizing of that plan? And then, like I said, this does get very in the weeds. We're going to say, look at the plan against, well, we want to do 0.5 because we want to see when the volume gets to a certain threshold, being 50% or represented by 0.5. Now, no data is going to show up in here. Yeah, we're going to get no results because we don't have enough data to hit 50%. So we're saying 100 gigs is what we're allocated to use. Let us know when we hit 50 gigs. The problem we're having here is we're not even hitting 50 gigs. So that's why I'm going to put a lower number here just to get some data back, where I'm saying, alert me when we get to 0.2% of threshold, not 50. And then I'm just going to kind of sort this. I'm going to remove some fields. But ultimately what I'm getting here, or should be getting, is the breakout now of the volume. And once again, the data volume app that we looked at earlier really shows this information better. We really should remove this lab because it's more cumbersome than need be. But ultimately, once we have the query, then we can go ahead and schedule this. So what we would want to do at the end of this is we have our query, we'd want to save as, and we want to choose to schedule the search. And the idea is that we could then go ahead and have this run periodically, and whenever, maybe we have it run in real time. Where's real time? I schedule the search. Sorry, that's what I wanted to do. There we go. And now I could have the condition met, meaning the next time I have something over 50% of plan, or in this case, it was over 0.2% of plan, I get an email. So this last part, I know it didn't show off very well, but the idea is you can go ahead and create a query, have that query alert you on a periodic basis, and then do something when you get alerted, maybe add more data to the plan, or limit the data, or whatever you need to do. All right, so that's lab 6, a little bumpy there, but okay. All right, so let's see. I think we're about ready to get in the exam. Yeah, so we're done with the labs. So thank you for sticking through them. A little bumpy, like I said, a little there at the end. That last lab is weird, but I think we got through them together, so feel good about that. What I want to do now is introduce you to the exam. Certainly, you still have the ability to ask questions, but want to get there. There was a question about can alerts be sent to a Slack channel? They absolutely can. So they can be sent. Email is kind of traditional, but we do have the ability for you to utilize webhooks. In fact, I'll just show it real fast. Connections. So what I can do is set up webhooks, set up Slack, ServiceNow, Microsoft Teams, all different kind of communications. So good question. Let's go ahead and talk about the exam now. So if you've taken an exam with us before, like I said earlier, you kind of know where I'm going with this. So you can already kind of start the exam if you want, but if you don't, that's fine. I'm going to go through step by step. What we want to do is we first want to log in to Sumo Logic as our corporate or professional or personal Sumo Logic account. We don't want training admin getting credit for the exam. We want you. So go ahead and log in as your, once again, your corporate, your professional account. Everybody on this call should have one, period. If you don't, let us know. We can kind of help, but everybody should have an account on here. So go ahead and do that. Once you've logged in, and I'll go through these steps a few times. Once you've logged in, you're now in Sumo. What I want you to do is go to the home page if you're not already there, and go specifically to certification. When you click on certification, you should have the option to get certified, and you want to click that. Once you click that, you should be brought into the certification portal shortly. And now we're in the certification portal. Now from here, we want to get certified because we want to get certified. That's what we want to do. When we click get certified, we're going to see all the different exams that are available to us. We have 20, I don't know, 15 or so, some in different languages. We're going to select the administration exam. It should show up on the top row. If not, it doesn't really matter, but it's going to be the administration exam in blue. We do have it in Japanese. I don't think that's relevant for anybody in this group, but if it is, or you're practicing Japanese on your own and you want to take it, go ahead. But otherwise, we'll choose the English one. We're going to register for free. With these exams, there's no cost to you, no cost to your organization. So free for you, free for everybody. We're going to go ahead and click start. It's going to give us some guidelines about the exam. And so I'll go through these guidelines right now. The guidelines are essentially that there's 30 questions and you have 60 minutes to take the exam. You're not going to need all 60 minutes, but you have it allocated to you. So feel free to use it if you need it, of course. The exam, as many of our other exams are, is open book, open documentation, open Google, open Sumo Logic documentation. So as you do in the real world, you have access to those resources. And so for this exam, you do as well. So feel free to use Sumo, use the documentation. The exam's many different ways. It's going to be some fill in the blanks, some multiple choice, a little bit of everything. Pass rate is 75, so you need 75 to pass. Now I'm going to show you just the next step here. So I'm going to click next here. And now, or in a moment, I'm going to take the exam. So I'm going to click Start Assessment. And then I'm going to take the exam, kind of fill in the blanks here. Once I'm done, I'm going to click Submit All Answers. Now, hopefully I got better than you, but actually you got better than me. So, you probably got 100, you got your 90, whatever you got. It's important that you click Close Course at this point. If you don't get credit for the exam. And this is not Sumo Logic design. This is the exam interface environment. But just it's important you do click Close Course there. So just a reminder, please do so. That primarily kind of covers it. So once again, let's start the exam. So, home certification, take the exam. Once you start it, Odell and I will be here for, at least till 7, if longer need be. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any. Otherwise, we'll just keep ourselves on mute just to not annoy you. I'll put up the slide with the Uber Eats because that's probably going to be most important to many of you. So as a reminder, and this is not even true anymore. So once you're done with the exam, send that certificate that you get to training-promotions@sumologic.com. Include your job title. We need job titles, and you'll get the Uber Eats voucher. We're a little delayed right now. You probably won't get it. Probably get it Monday, to be honest. You might get it on Friday, but you'll get it soon. So encourage you to do that. So once again, thanks for attending. Hopefully you're going to join us the rest of the week. We have 2 more classes coming up on tomorrow and the next day. And so those would be fun. And so, yes, we're taking the administration exam. So question. If it's asking to verify email, let me show you this. So if you're ready to take the exam, go ahead. Good luck. Yay, see you tomorrow. And if you want to hang with us and take the exam or leave, totally up to you. I'd encourage you to hang with us, but that's up to you. If you're getting a message about verify email, I want you to do, let's see if I have a slide on it still, this. So if you're getting some sort of issue where when you click on certification, you get looped back or it says something about verify email, do these steps. Go to the black bar and click on help and then click on community. And then a verification email should be sent to you. It might get sent to spam. It might take a moment or two. It shouldn't take too long, but then it'll be sent to you. And then you should be able to continue with the exam and go on. The exam is open indefinitely. So, we encourage you to take the exam now because you're here, but if you want to take it tonight, tomorrow, or for the weekend, next month, that's fine. So open, essentially indefinitely. All right, I think we're pretty good on questions. I'm going to go ahead and put, I'll leave this slide up just for another moment or two, and then I'll put that other slide. So how many exam attempts you get? You should get unlimited. I think it says only 1 when you start the exam, but my understanding is when you go back into it, it will let you retake it. And then it will save the most recent score, not the highest. So be careful. Question is, can we see the list of your certified users? Not yet. Soon. So if you want to see your certified users, I'd encourage you to reach out to Sumo. Ideally, you have a customer rep individual or even just training at Sumo, but we can help you with that. But no, I don't believe you have the ability yet. Yeah, so I'm going to put that other slide up. Like I said, I'm going to kind of just shut up, let you guys go at it. Best of luck, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.